If I fall over. Okay.
And, right,
Tell me when.
we are recording.
We are? Okay, good. Welcome everybody to tonight's City of Tumwater Planning Commission meeting for Tuesday, April 22nd, 2025. It's just about 7 o'clock and our meeting is called to order, and I'll do roll call like I usually do in alphabetical order. Commissioner Daniel. Here. Great. Commissioner Edwards.
Here.
Here. Commissioner Kirkpatrick.
Here.
Commissioner Kotek is excused. Commissioner Nelson. Here. Vice Chair Staff.
Here.
And me, Commissioner Robbins. Great. Quorum is at hand. Great. We can keep moving. Are there any changes to our agenda tonight from anyone? All right, moving on to item number 4, approval of our minutes. Turn around those, thanks. Any remarks?
I move to approve the minutes.
Very good. That was Commissioner Nelson moving to approve the minutes. Is there a second? That was Commissioner Daniel seconding. Any further comment? Changes, revisions? Okay, very good. It's been moved and seconded to approve our meeting minutes from April 8th, 2025. All in favor, please say aye.
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 Any opposed? Great. Our minutes are approved. Great. Thanks, everybody. Let's go to Commissioners' reports. Anybody have anything you want to bring up? Very good. I'll bring up, there was a bit of an exchange about some training opportunities, and you know, I understand from Brad that there is a little bit of ability for the city to help fund that for commissioners to participate in training opportunities that relate to our work here. So if you come across something, and Brad has been good, and maybe also Eric and Dana have also sent some things where something looks like it would be useful for you to learn about or participate in. I think there is some ability there, so it shouldn't be a hardship if you want to do that kind of thing. I think Commissioner Nelson has signed up for one already, so that's pretty cool. Yeah, there's some really cool stuff through the I always get them wrong, MSRC or MRSC, whichever one. And also the Department of Commerce has. Okay, Brad, do you, it says manager's report, but I'm sure it means the deputy director's.
Yeah, so some exciting news. We will have drafts of the comprehensive plan elements to you for your next meeting. We have both the technical report and the goals and policies done for lands for public purposes and the utilities. Actually, we're waiting for management team to complete the review, but it'll be ready in time for the packet for your first meeting in May. On your schedule, I think we still have the conservation element of that first meeting in May. It'll probably go back to the second meeting in May. Dan and Erica worked overtime to get that completed, so that's in pretty good shape. So your second meeting in May, we'll be talking about the housing element, which has about ready to go to management team review after we finish internal review. And it's described as by the director, Matlock, as being both beautiful and chunky. So it's going to be a lengthy document. But anyway, I think there's a lot of pretty pictures, so we're going to emphasize that. More importantly, there's a lot of good data and other things in there to support what we're intending to do with that. So that second meeting in May, we'll do the housing element and the conservation element. And then the first meeting in June, we should have the land use element ready to go. You'll see some changes to our land use map based on some of the discussions we've had about on the housing side. Mainly, what is the most appropriate densities and where do particular housing types fit in terms of income and so forth. So the housing discussion will set up that discussion in the first part of June. Also good news on the Habitat for Conservation front. Our consultant should be having a draft of the revised Habitat Conservation Plan to staff to review next week. That's a great thing. The service has been very willing to work with us on a lot of issues, and a little bit kind of scary because it's been rather easy to get things through, which hadn't been the case. But I think we'll have a draft that is probably acceptable to them or very close to being acceptable. So we'll be able to move on to the next steps with that. So, did I miss anything of importance?
I think you covered it.
Okay.
Well, except that the food systems plan is on its way to your ears in a moment. You have an update?
All right, good, thank you. Great progress. Brad, do we have anybody online? Or did you hear from anybody since we?
We didn't get any emails or phone calls or anybody online currently.
And I'm checking around, nobody is here otherwise to. All right. Move on then. Let's go to our food system plan update.
Right,
Dana's gonna introduce.
I'll introduce Dana Bowers, Associate Planner for Community Development Department at City of Tumwater. And I am introducing Rebecca Potasnik. She has been our consultant who has done extensive research in our community, including interviews of knowledge leaders and people who participate with the food system in a lot of different capacities. And I guess the knowledge that she has gained has led to our community food assessment. And so that kind of shows us, and she'll go into the details, but it shows us where we have things and systems that are working really well and where we have gaps. And then we, concentrate on how to better meet the needs in those gaps. So one of the three main things that we wanted to always keep in mind with this and to keep our scope is that we're thinking about how to provide healthy food to all members of the community, to reduce food waste, and to support local food production and processing. So that's really the scope of our work. So within that, we want to keep moving forward. And then because the food system is a large topic, if things do, spill out into other areas, then we'll ask ourselves to rein that in. But Rebecca's done an excellent job, and we're looking forward to hearing a little bit more of the detail. And I think, go ahead, take it away.
Yes, go on.
I'm Rebecca Pasnick. Last time I met with you all was in February, I believe, and at that point in time, I had finished the majority of my interviews and surveys. And Dana told me that tonight, if we want to, we can have up to an hour. And really what I'm hoping to do tonight is I do want to walk you through the materials, but I'm also hoping to get feedback from you, because what I'm looking for is the next phase of the project will be to take this snapshot that we have, sort of like this environmental scan of the current state of things, and to figure out what are the goals that you want in the food system plan. And I feel like that's really important to come from you all and the city council and the people that live here, and that then I can take that information and dive in and figure out what are the strategies and how do we make that happen. So that's what I'm hoping for tonight. And so I feel like at any point in this, if we could have this kind of conversational, feel free to interrupt me, ask questions. I can, do a presentation, but I'd really love to have a dialogue because I want to know what's important and the things that you're hearing about. And I'll walk you through this document. The other thing, I think that as I'm doing this work, as you are aware, the food system is greater than the city of Tumwater. And so while we're trying to anchor this, and the plan needs to be anchored in what can the city of Tumwater do towards the food system and the three overarching goals, I tried to keep that as the container, but there's definitely things that are outside of that that we need to consider. So there are other things that I bring up in the assessment, but I'm really trying to just keep a focus on Tumwater. So again, as Dana had said, the 3 overarching goals are the healthy food for all members of the community, reducing food waste, and supporting local food production and processing. So I guess I'd also ask you all to think of those. Those goals have already been established, right? But we're going to want some more granularity of goals within those 3. So as you saw in the report, I broke it up into these 7 sectors, and it was similarly the people that I interviewed and surveyed, I mostly categorized them into these 7. I actually categorized them into 9 sectors, which was also policy and government was another one, and another one was community advocacy. But in the terms of this report, I wove those other things into this. So I broke it out into these sectors. And so the first one, and then also I'll just say, I didn't put a slide on this. In your report, I had a page called A Recent History of Regional Collaboration. I thought that was really important for you to have just kind of a scan of how the work has looked like in the recent past. Because the food system is, like I said, we can't just contain it to the city of Tumwater. And so it seemed to me to be an important thing to bring to your attention the efforts that have been done in the past. And most of this regional collaboration is within Thurston County, but a little bit of a scan on what has happened previously. So with land use and conservation, some of the really notable things have to do with the disappearance of farmland. And again, there is farmland within city limits, notably like Rutledge Farms, who I interviewed, Bush Prairie Farm, which my understanding is kind of the current farmers have not been doing their CSA program, but that is farmland. So there is farmland within city limits, but most of the farmland, our major farmlands, are outside of city limits. So the statistic about the loss of farmland is really having to do with Thurston County, not the city of Tumwater. But farmland is disappearing. And there's, obviously a lot of really competing needs. I was just this week at a meeting that was at the Thurston Conservation District, right? And they're in a new location in one of the industrial parks within the city limits. And very close by is Rutledge Family Farms, right? And so it's just interesting how the land use patterns, and then also anchoring in some of that picture as a Camas Prairie. So I had mentioned a little bit about the traditional lands here, and so also something to consider is cultural ecosystems, and cultural ecosystems exist in even developed lands.
I have something. So today I was actually meeting with someone from Rutledge Farms at a conference for hospitality down at Lodge, and he brought up this decreasing space for farmland, and that they are a 30-acre farm, and that he goes to conferences with 200-acre farms, and they're like, you're only 30 acres, that shouldn't even be considered a farm.
Yeah.
His concern was something to do with the size of farms allowable in the city, I think is what he was talking about. And he had a concern around that, and was wondering if something like that could be changed to expand it more and to have more allowances. Didn't quite know exactly what he was talking about, but it was something that is fresh in my mind. And then for Bush Prairie Farm, I am the only descendant of the Bush family in the region. They would love for me to buy the farm. I cannot afford it. And then also it is now only 5 acres from the 560 something that it was in the beginning, which is quite sad. And most of that is now used as mitigation land for Kaufman. So it's interesting to look at Bush Prairie Farm and how it's been stripped down to that small section. And with 5 acres, you can't really have a sustainable farm in today's day and age, even if it's a CSA. That's one of the reasons they're getting rid of it, because they can't even afford to run a farm on 5 acres. It doesn't make sense to grow anything anymore. So.
I don't mean to be,
I'm curious, you.
okay, well, I had talked to the folks at Bush Prairie Farm, not for this project, but for something else I was doing. And I guess I was under the impression that they were not farming just due to their age and just wanting to get out of doing that. Because my understanding was that, that they had, that their CSA was a sustainable, I know there's CSAs that are sustainable on much less acreage than that.
Yeah.
So,
Two aspects of it. They are looking to get out of it. Also, their infrastructure with the pocket gopher,
yeah.
is making it so it's not sustainable anymore. And the chicken wire that they put down, to mitigate that has all rusted away. So it's now constant update and upkeep. And it's to the point where, the cost to keep that up has taken away from the profits of the CSA. So yeah, it's a very interesting piece, and, I agree, they could grow things there. And there are things like the bush butternut tree and some other things that I'm working with others on. However, is not a sustainable farm anymore. It's more of a historic landmark, sadly, at this point.
Something I did interview Robbie Rutledge, and a concern that he brought up as well was the proximity of that farm to the airport and concerns about, potential eminent domain at some point in the future for airport expansion. And I think a lot of people are more familiar with the corn maze,
Yeah.
but they do grow food, besides the agro-tourism, and so.
Yeah, because it was Robbie who I was talking with today at this convention. He was adamant on all this, so I'm glad you're echoing what he said. He would love to have more land to actually grow food, but that agro-tourism portion is what is kind of keeping them around. He's like, we can only grow so many carrots and so many, something else he said.
Green beans.
Yeah, he's like, we can only grow so many of that, and it doesn't keep us afloat.
It's also interesting in their agro-tourism, the number of youth that they, have as seasonal employees is a lot, so, that's an interesting farm.
Well, thank you.
Yeah.
Rebecca, before we
Mhm.
move on to
Yeah.
this, a couple of points. When we say farmland is disappearing, it sounds like, we're not like kind of recognizing what's really going on, which is, it doesn't just poof, vanish from the planet. It's actually being converted to other uses.
That's right.
And I'm wondering if we could be more direct about saying, we're using this land for other purposes, and that's why it's coming out of farmland. And then the other kind of related thing is that, and I don't know whether this comes into your report, maybe I missed it, that the loss of the farmland, there's still, I don't know so much about within somewhat or city limits, of the UGA, but some of the farmland is non-food agriculture, timber, for example, I think, and maybe even animal husbandry, maybe that counts as both.
I believe in this statistic,
Yeah.
I don't believe it's tree farms, but I should double check that, but I would think that it might be, ranching might be included in it.
Okay. I think it would be helpful to be accurate about that because, there are, I think, still some tree farms and folks who are growing, maybe they're growing animals for fiber, not food, or, like the llamas or the sheep.
Right, for wool, okay.
I mean, which is important, but it's not, we're not talking about the food component.
Yep.
So,
Distinction, yeah.
yeah, and a lot of people are doing, some of everything.
That
But-
stat I got from, the USDA, the agricultural census, but I can get into the granularity and.
Yeah, I think it's careful to,
Mhm.
I think it is good to be careful about how we're talking about it, so we're clear about things. And then, go ahead. I was just, one more thing, you probably did this, but I want to check that, did you talk to anybody with the Thurston Conservation District?
I did. Great. Yes. I spoke with Nora White and Tina Wagner.
Patrick?
While we're bundling reasons for this, I think what our key one today is can't get people to work on a farm.
That's right.
Correct.
Not only does the owner, no longer have the, ambition to work 18 hours a day for practically nothing, and pay out to people, he can't find the people to pay out to come in and work the farm, so. Really doesn't matter if you're losing farmland, farmland would be sitting empty anyway.
Correct, it's the rest of the ecosystem there too, the economic situation, and frankly, the political situation.
Well, I think it has to do with culture. The culture today is urbanization. Everybody's supposed to move to the urban area. The urban area is supposed to be high,
Right.
the rest of the county is supposed to be wide. So, if you want to live on 5 acres, then you can live in Thurston County. If you want to live in the city of Tumwater, you're going to have to give up the opportunity to be a farmer. It's not to say you can't have community gardens. I think that's something there are lots of things that we can do.
Mm-hmm.
But a real honest goodness farm within city limits is not the culture today.
So I do see some things in my neighborhood. There's a couple that are kind of the vacant kind of lot or a couple of lots, and they are converting it to a large garden. They actually have a little farm stand in the summer.
The Thurston Conservation District has a program called Farm My Yard,
Yeah.
for people who have, land, not necessarily like big enough for a farm, but like what you're talking about, that are willing to offer it to other folks to do big gardening.
I mean, there's, maybe there's some different scales. We're talking a lot about the food system and food availability. There's a lot, it's not necessarily just the big, or even smaller
Yeah.
commercial growers.
All
It's
sizes.
all kinds of people trying to make some food available.
Yep.
Okay, carry on.
Folks feel okay about moving, and then, Grace, you'll chime in if you've got.
Yeah, and I did kind of a question about this, and I don't know if we know the answer to this now, but I was kind of thinking about, the farmland that we no longer have, that 27%. If we knew what percentage of that, or if it had been impacted at all about the global warming and the climate, like maybe that farmland was good farmland at one point, but because of the climate and everything, maybe that it changed, so it wasn't able to be used as farmland. Has that been looked into at all?
That statistic about the 27% of acreage loss and the 17% of farms, that's Thurston County specific. And my understanding is that, as you spoke to Commissioner Robbins, was that it has been converted to housing or to commercial and industrial purposes.
Okay, so just it hasn't anything else has come of that. It's literally just gone to housing and stuff like that. Because
That's right.
okay, and not because things haven't been able to like grow on the land or whatever, but just because it just needed to go to housing.
Yeah, and when I've talked to the farmers that I spoke with and asked them questions about has climate change impacted them, they would speak up about some things about different pests or, but no one spoke up in a really dramatic way that they had to abandon a certain sort of crop that they've been growing because of climate change. They mentioned smaller things that they've noticed, but nothing so great that they abandoned farming.
Perfect, thank you.
Mr.
There's
Kirkpatrick.
one more in there.
Yes.
In your outline here, you talked about community farmland trust.
That's right.
So I dug a little bit deeper and looked at Scatter Creek Farm Conservation Area, where they are actually basically leasing out or helping people buy without a land cost,
That's right.
60-acre farm.
Mhm.
And there's land still available. It's not as if, people are fighting over it. But you've got people actually there producing and providing food to the city of Olympia, out of the, what did it say, Persic Farm.
Kershaw Farm, yep.
Yeah. Vegetables, grains, and poultry. And it mainly comes up to farmers markets
Mhm. Mhm.
up here. So, there is agricultural land available, and there are people that are using it, but only because there's a subsidy involved. In other words, they couldn't afford to buy the land, but the land has been put in a conservatory, which covers basically the cost of the land.
That's
right.
They just need to find the person who's willing to go farm it.
And what I hear is that, especially up-and-coming farmers, young farmers that want to farm, that's their biggest barrier, access to land, that they just can't afford. They can't afford the land. And so that is, like, the Community Farmland Trust, part of their mission is to make it affordable to people who can't afford it.
Thank you for putting that in there.
Yeah. Folks feel good, we'll move on to the we're already kind of talking about that, processors and producers, which, processors are, I bring it up in two different places in the report under, the workforce and processors and producers about what you had mentioned about hearing that, labor shortages, and part of that is, labor costs, a lack of interest in folks in doing farming. There was an interesting, work done, I believe I have it in this section. No, it's in the, I'll save that for, workforce development. Processors and producers, there's a lot happening right now with food hubs. So we've got both the, and again, these are not within the city limits of Tumwater, but definitely serve, the city of Tumwater, the South Sound Food Hub and the Southwest Food Hub. So those are exciting developments. And then the Craft District and the Warehouse District that are within city limits. Are interesting developments supporting processors and producers in the region. The Ag Park in Tenino, which you might wonder, like, why I would bring that up since Tenino is quite a distance away, but because they are, Colvin Ranch is going to be having this USDA-approved butchering, that's going to should make a very big change for a lot of local ranchers, which I would imagine would also make changes for folks here that are looking to purchase local meat, because it should bring the cost down. Colvin Ranch has been, they truck their animals to eastern Washington. And so, like.
large cost.
Yeah, not even central Washington, they go all the way to eastern.
Well, it might be central, but over the mountains, right? Like, they're like,
Sorry, I lived in central Washington
yeah,
for a couple decades.
I forget I did hear where they were taking it, and I forget the exact location, but for, folks that are doing that on the regular, that's a lot, not to mention, you're driving cows, like, not, it's a lot of
cows.
yeah, so a really big impact. So that's a really exciting,
Do that from Texas to Kansas City every year.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah, yeah, it's not
And they
unusual.
did it horseback.
yeah.
Yeah.
So it's an
Grove,
exciting
isn't
development.
it?
Phase one, there's gonna be multiple phases for that development. And then I'm sure that you all have heard about the Fresh Farm, which is an amazing collaboration with the Tumwater School District and the Parks Department, so that the Tumwater School District has this alternative high school program, and they've grown over 13,000 pounds of food since inception. But with budget cuts, they're looking to end that program at the end of June. So, and that's another thing I feel like, infused throughout this report, there's so many changes right now, and also at the federal level, so I feel like there's a lot of stuff, in flux that I'm just not going to be able to keep up with, but, and so I'm not sure, and I did not, by the time I knew that news, like, I did not say, talk to anyone. I did talk to Todd Anderson, with Parks Department in relation to the Old Town Center and more about food access and security for the folks that, the seniors that do meal programs there. But I never talked to, and I talked with, Chuck Denny, and I did some email exchange, but we haven't interacted about the Fresh Farm, so I haven't heard, I don't know, and if you all know anything about if there's plans for that, the land, on Fresh.
Good question.
Making a note, and I can follow up with it with the staff of the Parks Department.
Yeah.
It was about 10 years ago that Olympia High School was selling Christmas trees.
Yeah.
That piece of land right adjacent to Olympia High School, and that was one of the classes for the kids to learn how to operate not necessarily a Christmas tree farm, but to operate anything.
Yeah.
And they actually, planted the trees, they took care of the trees, and then they sold, the student body did.
Yeah.
Great learning,
Mhm.
thing, but they couldn't afford to keep doing it.
This is also something that came up today, was our young generation that's coming up, and, even like a student store where they can operate a student store and sell things and learn these trades is almost non-existent in the schools today. And from the hospitality background, the conversation was, we're getting this group that's coming in, and they're kind of, they don't care, they don't want to be here, they don't have any drive, motivation, and, I mean, growing up, that's what we had. We had student store, we had church store, we had whatever to learn business, and then you would go and you would sell Christmas wreaths, or you'd sell candy bars, or all these other things. And that was one thing that multiple people brought up in this meeting, was we need more of that. And, I think it was Shelton School District was talking about how they're driving that home in their youngest generations. I work at the Children's Museum, and one of the things I'm trying to drive home is how can we now impart our 0 to 10-year-olds and build on that from that generation and pass it off to the future generations. So very important, and I think that skills like that should be driven home, and if Tumwater can do that, that'd be great. We shouldn't lose a program like that. That's so sad.
I had a question in this section about the access to water.
Yeah.
Can you tell me more about that?
Well, some folks just spoke about the high costs of water access for them. So there are, like if you've got a community, if someone was doing like, say, Farm My Yard, and then they're doing irrigation, and then the cost of water can be high.
And they didn't say much more. So it isn't about water rights or the
It wasn't
ability
about
to
water
do
rights.
wells or have water tanks or anything.
No, and I didn't get into it because I only spoke with a handful of farmers, and they weren't bringing up, and again, with that being outside of city limits, water access that I was thinking about more was within city limits, and that had to do with more cost of water. Or sometimes places where there might be a nice location, sunwise or clearance for a garden, but there's no literal access to water. There's no way to irrigate.
Mr. Kirkpatrick.
And it's not just that, if you live in Tumwater, you use city water. You're not gonna be able to dig a well
That's right.
in your backyard. So there are city, codes, that restrict, you to buying water from the city, and it isn't cheap, and it's going up at a very, fast rate, because as we annex more of the city, we've got to build a system to support it.
Mm-hmm.
So it's just, it's an unending process as Tumwater grows. Utilities costs are gonna be very expensive, and the city's required to, reimburse itself for the cost of those utilities. That has to be a straight transaction. They can't subsidize that.
And it's my understanding, I believe when I asked Kristen Maring, who's the teacher at the Fresh Farm, I do believe that the city or the Parks Department was paying for the water. Like, I don't think the school district was paying for the water for the Fresh Farm. So there were things that, the city was bringing to the table to help make that possible for them. And I'll have to double check my notes on, was Fresh paying for the water, but I don't think they were.
Well, it feels like to me it's really directly related to some other parts of this report, which, by the way, I really like the way you did this. I just wanted to give you that compliment, that you're highlighting the key developments, and then you're giving us some.
I had to keep it lean because I know you have tons of stuff to read. So I wanted to make it like,
Yeah, anyway.
distinct.
But actually, before I came here tonight, because I married an orchardist from Yakima Valley, there's a whole big thing about water rights and how people get water, and the folks that can still have cisterns, for example, water tanks, either below ground or sitting above ground, all those kinds of things that maybe aren't quite so common over here. So it's just,
There's a couple of things I've been thinking about, and I apologize for interrupting. in regard to water, we don't have an irrigation district as such that
Right.
they could provide the agricultural access to water that they would have in central or eastern Washington. That's important for controlling costs, because when you look at our water usage overall as a city, it spikes probably about 2 or 3 times a regular month during the summer as people water. So that's a it's very intensive things, and depending upon the agricultural things you do, that can be very water intensive. So that's part of the calculation. Back to your point about whether or not cisterns and other things of water capture can be used. Ecology have been moving in the recent past towards allowing much more of that. One of the big battles we had 10 years ago was ecology said no. Basically, the water falls in the ground, it goes into either the rivers or goes into the for the well use. You can't cut it off and use it. Before that, I think they have relaxed a lot of that recently, and I think that might be, it's not obviously for a huge scale, but it is something that could be considered more now than it could in the past.
Interesting, because that's kind of maybe that's in the policy stuff that gets woven through to explore that opportunity about can it be relaxed further? Can we allow it for certain uses like that, food production or at least, you know, the rooftop capture into smaller cisterns.
Question for Rebecca. One of the big things, I grew up in California. Position where I was very much like it was an ag community. It was a community that relied on not the high intensive money-making ag at the beginning, meaning that you had lots of, you know, livestock and other things. But it was moving very rapidly into the only way you're going to make money is to grow grapes, which essentially at the ag end of things is the end. If you can't grow grapes, you're done. You should, you know, you can't, it's not worth it anymore. Is that kind of an issue up here, or is it just the transition from, we've got open space that is being converted to other uses, not necessarily we're at the high end of whatever the ag is in terms of.
No one brought up specific crops to me. Yeah,
We're not dealing with that kind of thing.
that was
That's
not.
a good thing.
Yeah.
I didn't know there was an apex ag.
Well, it concerns me when I look at the central area of Washington, when they're converting pears and apples into
Right.
vineyards.
Right,
Because it's rare that you
yes.
convert away from that to something else.
Yeah, Southern Oregon where I grew up, same thing, it was pears everywhere. Now I was just back there, I'm like, what happened? It's mainly all, grapes.
On the same end, are we including in our discussion, and when we talk about crops, different kind of crops, one of the crops that the county is looking at, their restrictions and, regulations for is cannabis. Is that something, a crop that, I know we have our own restrictions,
Well, cannabis is not,
an agricultural crop.
yeah, Washington State would consider, my understanding is they could consider hemp as an agricultural crop if
Right.
you were growing the hemp. Again, if, you know, you could be growing it for fiber, but there are, you know, hemp seed. But cannabis, is not considered, it's not considered a food crop.
Right.
It could be considered medicinally, but it is not treated at the state level, at least.
No. But I'm wondering if land that could be used for food is being used for that higher value crop.
My understanding is the large hemp farms are in central and eastern Washington, I don't think
Okay.
there's a lot of hemp happening in Thurston County.
You can have the high yield grapes, right?
It's a little more invisible right now, still.
I think there are some, but I think they're not.
Yeah.
There
Well,
was,
to be clear,
there's a
the-
neighborhood where they discovered that down the hill, there was quite a bit of cannabis growing.
But cannabis and hemp are, like, different licenses, and it's
Mhm.
And now that it's legal, hopefully the state does know where all of the cannabis farms are.
I'm being aware of time, and we're only 2 sectors in, so
Great.
folks feel good. Grace, did you have anything you wanted to comment on this, sector?
No, not on this one, thank you.
The next one is retail and distribution. Oh, and again, the food hubs, I guess I talked about them with processors and producers, again, because so many things are intertwined. I thought, there is a farmer's market in Tumwater. It's very limited on when it operates. I spoke with, Mitch Lewis with Summit Farms. He's the board chair of the, farmer's market. And then back again to the warehouse and craft districts. You're also got a lot going in retail, besides processing and producing, retail. And the farm to school program, which I mentioned as a potential resource, that resource actually is not used by the Tumwater School District. So it's out there, it's not used. And again, there's only so much that the city, the school district and the city are separate governmental entities. So,
And part of the districts in the county.
In this section, did you hear in any of your interviews or other research about essentially export of either produce or produced goods from that produce outside of Thurston County? Something, something that's grown sufficiently that it has an export market outside the county.
did not, but that's a good
As part of an
question,
economic.
and I could ask that.
For example, when we used to have the brewery, and maybe
Right.
still with the craft district, some of that production may make its way well beyond. I don't think it's all consumed
Absolutely.
here.
It was interesting, I had reached out to the Thurston Economic Development Council to ask them to pull me some data to get me a list of all the processors and producers that are in Tumwater. And there were so many limitations to how they pull that data, because what I noticed, because I scanned it for some things, and Spud's grocery store was not captured on it at all. So I was like, okay, so if that's not even captured on it, how, I wasn't sure how much I could rely on it, because at one point I thought that I might, be able to get that data and then send a survey out to what was on there, but it wasn't, it seemed like there were too many flaws in it. But I do have some of the subject matter experts that I talked to that I could ask about exports. Yeah, I didn't ask that.
Mr. Kirkpatrick.
When we're talking about food scarcity and those items there, I don't think your farmer's market is economical for someone who is low income. Even if the farmer's market, which ours does, accepts WIC and food stamps. I did a quick check, looking at you mentioned South Sound Fresh down here, and I can get a whole chicken there, but it costs $8 a pound.
Yeah.
I can go to Fred Meyer's and I get the same chicken for $5 a pound, with organic. The same nutrition, the same quality. There may be some things at the farmer's market that are price competitive, but food, I don't think, is one of them.
The state does offer something called Market Match, and the Tumwater Farmers Market does do Market Match, which basically doubles your food stamps. So if you use your SNAP benefits at the farmers market, they go twice as far. So I think in somewhat in recognition of sometimes there's higher costs for buying local. Yeah.
So my recommendation now, for getting into it.
Yeah.
You need to build a community center, give the senior center in Tumwater to the food bank, and let them operate some of these things out of that building. Giving them the building would take a price tag off the city, because it costs the city something to maintain it and to operate it. So if you turn it over to a nonprofit, and we can give them the space to do some of these things. I throw in that one out.
Great.
It's in right now.
I think it's great. I had on here, one of the goals was to try to get a food bank in Thurston County, and you just figured out how to do it.
Well, we have the food bank in Olympia, and I was meeting with 3 of the people that run it, and they're trying to get,
And then in Tumwater, sorry.
yeah, they're trying to get it more organized, but then they would be more than happy to probably help out with that.
Yeah.
They're going through some challenges right now, though. But yeah, I agree, getting one in Tumwater would be great. Or what about the Armory?
Yeah.
What's happening with that?
In this section too, I'm also wondering about, I mean, I might be in the wrong section, maybe it's in access. But I'm interested in essentially easy walking access to food. Is that the coming?
Well, I feel like it's interwoven. I do bring that up, and I can't think offhand which section, but that, I think it's under the food access. and
Okay, we'll
security.
get to it,
Yeah.
but I'm interested in, you know, maybe scales, walking, biking, car, and so on, yeah.
Grace, do you feel complete on retail and distribution?
Yes, I do. Thank you.
So waste reduction and recovery. Something that I heard, and actually is an element that is repeated in many sections, has to do with, and this has to do with food rescue, the capacity limitations on cold storage, and that being a real barrier to reusing more food. I also heard, kind of back to when I was started this, talking about the regional collaborations that have happened in the past. I've also had heard from some people that they felt like in the past there had been more regional collaboration on waste reduction and recovery, and that has waned some in recent years as well. There are state laws now that have to do with it being mandated, but there's no real enforcement. So,
The Thurston County Food Bank's refrigeration warehouse is new. I mean, that's only been there for 2 years. So before that, they had a very small refrigeration unit to even hold the turkeys at Christmas time, over in Olympia. But, it's there, and I'm sure they'd be glad to expand it. Some help.
I spoke with Stephanie Penland. She's the person that does the Meals on Wheels through Senior Services, and she spoke of big limitations that she has on cold storage. And, you know, they're doing all for scratch cooking. So like the school district does not do all for scratch cooking, but Meals on Wheels is scratch cooking, and they have that limitation. Back to what the Old Town Center, there is a small commercial kitchen at Old Town Center, back to when you were speaking about repurposing the building.
Does this section talk about using some food waste in other production? For example, I don't know, you know, feeding it to hogs,
That's
or
right.
using it for fuel,
Yes.
or things like that?
So that pyramid, that's right in front of you, that
Yeah.
upside-down pyramid,
Mhm.
is the idea is that we want our food waste first, let's not waste it, right?
Right,
Let's learn
right.
how to buy what we need and how to store it properly.
Right.
And then if we're gonna have some waste, the next best purpose is then let's, you know, get it out of our pantry and get it to someone who's gonna use it.
Mhm.
And so as the pyramid goes, then the next purpose is then let's feed it to animals.
Yeah.
And so so it's interesting, the food bank, they don't do green waste because all their waste, any waste that they have, they do have hog farmers that come get that waste. And I heard from some other folks, some other hog farmers, that they actually would like to have more access to food waste. So I feel like there's no, I'm guessing there's no shortage of food waste in the community, it's just getting it
Yeah,
to
the
the
transport,
right
the
purpose.
connecting it,
Yeah.
yeah.
And then as you get narrowed down, like the last part is to landfill it, and even above that is using it for, non-food purposes,
Mhm.
but for fuels and things like that.
Right, yeah. And I don't know if there's many chicken farms in the vicinity or not, but,
Well, and my
All of that.
understanding is for the bulk of sort of mixed food waste,
Oh,
it's
yeah.
eating it to pigs.
Yeah,
The chickens are
right.
a little more,
a little pickier.
You've captured it here
Yeah.
in your notes, but Tumwater contracts with LeMay, for, the pickup of our garbage.
Mm-hmm.
They do a separate pickup, for food and yard waste,
That's right.
and that is locally made into a mulch.
Mm-hmm.
Most of it's sold up in Pierce County, unfortunately, not
Mhm.
sold down here.
Yeah.
But that must be probably the distribution center,
Mhm.
because LeMay is not just Thurston County. LeMay
Right.
is all of western
Right.
Washington.
It's not the
And so
West Coast.
Brady Trucking and Silver Spring Organics, so like that picture is Silver Spring Organics, and they're the folks that,
Yeah.
that. Grace, you're wanting to say something?
Oh, yeah, thank you. I was just wondering, if we had any metrics offhand that maybe we could share, just to kind of help me wrap my head around, like, how much we're actually talking about for, like, in Tumwater, like, how much does actually get wasted or go to different, things, and getting some numbers to that might be helpful.
Great. I did not get any metrics, but I will do that. Thank you.
Yeah.
I'm gonna guess too that, probably when I get that number, I'm gonna guess that there's numbers available, and I'm gonna guess too that there might not be the ability to pull out what, say, yard waste
Mhm.
versus food waste, but all the same, some kind of number would be helpful, like you said, to just kind of imagine it, what we're talking about.
Thank you.
Yeah,
Commercial's probably gonna be separate too.
yep. Again, in the interest of time, do folks feel okay about moving on? So this next one I feel like is like one of the biggest sections, the access and security. And so this is the part where I mentioned the market match program. The number, so the thing that really stood out to me was that the Thurston County Food Bank had said that the increase in rates that they see, this, outpaces the growth rate for the county. So they have more people wanting services than overall population increase in the county, which really speaks to higher levels of need. The other thing that I heard a lot was just how food costs are going up, regardless of if you're at the farmer's market or if you're at Costco, just that food prices are going up. And that the SNAP benefits that people get is tied to the thought that you're gonna spend 30% of your income on food. And that's also based on the Thrifty Food Plan. And again, like, I chopped out so many things. I went into to understand how rates for food assistance is figured out. And the Thrifty Food Plan, it's just one of 4 food plans, right? And that's like the most minimum food plan. And so it's all assuming that you're spending 30% of your income on food. But what I'm hearing also from some folks is they're spending 50 to 70% of their income on housing costs. Whereas, we used to say that affordable housing was 25 to 30% of your income. So, if you're spending 50% of your income on food, on housing, people are having a harder time paying for food, and then again, harder for the protein-dense food and the fresh food. So eggs, meat, fish, milk, those are the things that are harder. And there was a little bit of data that I got from the Thurston County Food Bank. Again, within the scope of the work that I could do, I did not interact with people that are patrons of the food bank to get information from them, but the food bank did give me some client information they had gathered from Tumwater patrons in the past. And one of the things that they had said was that those items, the protein-rich and the fresh fruit items, were items that they were wishing they could get more of when they're accessing emergency. The Thurston County Food Bank, as we talked about before, does not have a brick and mortar location. Their warehouse is in Tumwater, but that is not for serving clients. They have 5 satellite locations. This goes into also transportation issues. Oftentimes, the places, you know, are maybe open Monday through Friday, 9 to 5, when you're also having to work. So there's restrictions. It can be hard to access. I know, you know, I'm usually shopping on the weekends or on the evenings myself. But so I did bring up a little bit about affordable housing under access and security, because I do think there's ways that, you know, that housing costs are tied to access, transportation is tied to access. And so there were elements that I referenced in here, I can't remember offhand, and you planners over here probably know offhand, but there are things in some of the draft elements that speak to, you know, having anchors of, you know, grocery anchors in developments, and I feel like that speaks to some of the things that you were raising about thinking about transportation, walkability, transit, and different roads that people need to be.
Or even delivery, I guess you could say too, as part of that.
That's right.
Particular, you know, for kind of folks. I'm curious about the kind of the cost of food kind of question. And do you know if it's just kind of any and all kind of food, whether it's, you know, kind of grocery ingredients that you prepare, or already prepared food, or food you buy in restaurants, or is it all lumped?
That is lumped.
Okay.
And I'd say from my personal experience, I'd say it's all the, in all the areas, but that's lumped. But I mean, I even heard from like, when I spoke with, the head of nutrition services at the Tumwater School District, you know, he spoke of the food costs have gone up.
Yeah.
So I mean, I feel like everyone in so many, institutionally, they're experiencing higher food costs.
Right, right. Yes, I totally get that. I'm just,
Yeah.
you know, and for probably some folks who don't even, I mean, they're kind of forced into having to buy prepared food on account of they maybe don't live in or have a place to prepare their own food from ingredients. So there is a trap, if you will, or a spiral to never kind of get ahead of that. Even if it's still high price, it's still maybe less cost if you have the means to prepare your own food.
So costly.
Yeah.
I
Is
chose,
this picture up here,
yeah,
that a school lunch or what,
that's Meals on Wheels.
Meals on Wheels?
Yeah, so Meals on Wheels,
I thought they froze that.
they prepare, well, and this picture might be pre-frozen, right? Like they're preparing it, you know, in this photograph. Yeah, my understanding is that Meals on Wheels, actually, I think when it's delivered, actually, I'm not sure. I know that it's set up so that you could get it delivered to you and it would be good to go to freeze. And I'm not sure if they're delivering it frozen or delivering it not frozen. My gut, and I could double check this, I would say that they're not delivering it frozen based on what Stephanie said about their restrictions on cold storage, but I can find that out.
I'm just thinking about the person who's driving around making all of those deliveries, and how do they keep that frozen at the right temperature in the vehicle?
Yeah, that was not even brought up as a problem, so, yeah. I included in the little charts that I put on here, the bottom one, the graph about food sources by value and weight. I just wanted to include that. That's not Tumwater specific, that's the food bank. And one reason I also wanted to raise that was in thinking about where the food comes from, especially when we're thinking about some of the budget cuts that are happening statewide or federally, to think about what, you know, how that might affect the food that's going out.
Graph at the top of that page, is that for a year?
That's right. That was 2024. Because the food bank, and it's an interesting graph, that patterns of patronage, because people could be not Tumwater residents that go to one of the Tumwater satellites, or you could be a Tumwater resident that goes, you know, anywhere to get the
Mhm.
food, but they do track that.
Another point that occurred to me as I was reading this section, and I wouldn't want you to go back and do any further work on it, but on the issue of food security, for children, if they're in a child care center, if they're in a Head Start classroom, if they're in a school district classroom, those kids are getting fed nutritious foods for the most part.
That's right, and I had
It's
covered.
just the kind of the weekend that often is the
Mhm.
piece, and I'm not sure if there's still the weekend program, if anyone knows.
I don't know.
Food, okay, they used to have kids take backpacks on the
Mhm.
weekend and take food home, but it was just, again, one of those strategies to make sure that our children, at least, are getting sufficient food.
Sorry, so, yeah, they have, because of experience, for the Tumwater Middle School, the kids are given like a bag of food, they come for the weekend, every Friday. However, in my opinion, what I've seen is not very nutritious, what they send, it's like just ramen and, you know,
But they're not doing scratch kitchen, that's why.
Right.
But
Yeah.
we won't even bring
And
that
I
up.
think it's because of the same issue that food is expensive, that's what.
And I'm also curious too, if some of that is, not knowing what people have access to in terms of kitchens at home, so you can like boil some water and make the ramen and not necessarily do anything with a pile of produce or dried beans, yeah. Again, in the interest of time, shall we move on? Public health and nutrition, Commissioner Nelson, that's where I brought up about, free and reduced lunches.
Yeah.
And so they don't do for scratch cooking, mostly the kitchens aren't set up to do that anymore. And that was a reason why too, when one of the reasons why they don't do the farm to school program, because they just mostly can't deal with lots of, fresh fruits and vegetables.
Mhm.
Not set up for that, and also the staffing costs as well, the additional preparation. Another issue that I heard from, say, like Meals on Wheels and Food Rescue is that it can be challenging to incorporate food rescue sometimes into meal programs, because all the meal programs, like, they follow really strict nutrition standards. And so if you know, if you're setting your menus ahead of time versus like, oh, someone just brought us, you know, a pallet of this, and then trying to incorporate that into a menu when you need to run it by a dietitian to make sure it's nutritionally sound. So it's some of the challenges of incorporating rescued food into meal programs. And Grace, you just pop in, if you've got any, we're kind of, cruising through because I'm being aware of time here.
Yeah, no problem. Thank you.
Okay. And then the last sector is the education and workforce. And I did, again, bring up, the Tumwater Fresh program, because, that is a place that young people were learning about the food system. A lot of the schools, and Tumwater schools as well, have school gardens. And oftentimes the school gardens, it's not necessarily institutionalized into, say, the curriculum, like Fresh is institutionalized curriculum, but it could be at the kind of the whim of, you know, staff that want to lean into that, or community members that champion it, or staff, I forget which school it was, but it was brought up to me that there's like, you know, a person who's maybe a custodian that like really champions the school garden. And so they can be there, but I feel like there's a sort of mixed in terms of the emphasis on the school garden. Under the current collaborations and resources, I mentioned some work that was done by Pack Mountain and the Quest, the Quality Jobs Equity Strategy and Training. There's a bunch of work that was done just fairly recently about connecting younger people to jobs in agriculture and in a range, in jobs within the food system, and especially there is, as you were saying, Commissioner Kirkpatrick, sometimes a lack of interest in some of those jobs. And there's also a lack of awareness of the breadth of jobs within the food system. And there are some people and young people who do crave more of a hands-on work and less sort of, you know, computer,
Abstract.
you know, interfacing, and that there's just a little bit of a lack of exposure to even knowing that one could, you know, what does that look like to have a job in a different kind of area? And so they have put some program and materials together to try to expose younger people to the breadth of employment opportunities within the food system. And there's, you know, in Tumwater, you know, New Market Skills Center, which serves more locations than just Tumwater, but is housed in Tumwater. You've got South Puget Sound Community College, also housed right here, which does have programs in food systems. We've got ASHO, the Cultural Community Center, which also just started a new workforce program. So I feel like there are a number of opportunities here in Tumwater that are preparing people to be engaged in the food system. And that was my last sector. So then the other things that I just wanted to ground you in, to remind you, was that it was agreed that this food system plan would be grounded in these guiding principles of equity, sustainability, stability, resiliency, and efficacy. The next few slides that I had, I didn't know how much time this would take, was just kind of going through each one to remind you what those things are. And then it was basically to kind of keep us grounded in thinking about those guiding principles and thinking about what are the different goals that you want from your food system plan. And I think, again, the efficacy is, again, like, what can the city of Tumwater do? Because we can't tell the school district what to do. You know, so it's like, to think about, I mean, you could give me a goal that has something to do with the school district, and then I guess that would be on me to kind of think, like, and look and research what are ways, and are there other communities that have had collaborations between a municipality and a school district? I mean, and you all have one with the Fresh Farm, and other ways to support that. But again, just, I'm very much grounded in keeping this, like, what can the city do? And having goals that we can really track on. What those are, and then the last slide is just my contact information, so that you should feel free to out to me if.
I wonder if on some of the goals, at whatever scale, I mean, this is a long-term issue, so there's going to be. It's not going to happen all at once, and there's going to be maybe steps or milestones we can strive for and reach, hopefully accomplish some of those things, you know, over time or with whatever resources. So I think it would be useful to kind of understand that timing element. You know, when are things critical? When is it, you know, going to if we've lost an opportunity for whatever reason, you know, that kind of thing, where we know, you know, what kind of progress do we need to make through time in order to help alleviate some of the difficulties that we see.
And do you mean in the sense of that this plan has the time element, like how your comp plan update is, like, it's a 20-year plan?
Somewhat, yes. So if it's, I mean, I can't really think of anything that would be relevant, but for example, if there's a situation where the city, say, for example, needs to commit to an annual time kind of thing, an annual subsidy of something, a food bank or a school program, or if there's a time element to when it's important to engage in a partnership with the school district or whatever other entity. And then, you know, did we serve more people this year? And then the next year, did we serve some more people? Did we feed some more people, you know, each year? So there's, you know, that kind, and there's probably lots of other
Yes,
ways to think about that, but essentially you're making progress,
that's right.
you know,
To be
all
able
the
to track
time.
that.
You're not like, just like, here we are now and we're expecting something miraculous 20 years from now.
Right.
I think one way of looking at that obviously is that the long time frame is a good one, just to make sure that a lot of things are covered, but the city does budgeting on a biannual basis, so
Okay.
I think keying up, particularly, and the timing for this is actually really good because this sets up a draft plan this year. The council will be able to take that into consideration as part of their budgeting decisions next year for the next 2 years. But I think in terms of developing a timeline, in terms of this is what we can do, or here's some proposed ways to take action, laying out things that the council can consider as part of the budgeting process and say, okay, within this 2-year window, we could do this, we could provide funding for this, or staffing for this, or whatever you choose to do, but that's probably the most,
Here's when it's,
makes the most sense, I think, in my mind, from
yeah.
fitting that into how the larger.
Maybe there's some other elements that are not necessarily time-related, but that are still milestones. We've achieved something, you know.
Yeah, to be able to track progress.
Yeah.
And I think those milestones are important too, just to keep motivation going on some of
Yeah,
the,
yeah.
but you know, because it goes back to the whole like composting thing, right? Like I know Cody, my husband, and I, we have a compost bin at our house, right? And it's one of those things like it would motivate me personally to see like something from the city of Tumwater, like, hey, we have this goal that, you know, households compost X amount each month or something like that. And are we meeting that goal or are we not meeting that goal? Like, this is what you can do to help, right? And kind of tracking that just to help get people more involved at that the level that they can always help. So even just again that with like funding from the city council or the state, just keeping that motivation to show, hey, we're working on this, we're making progress. This is where we are and this is where we want to be. Like
That makes sense.
Okay, conversation.
Well, and, I mean,
Yeah,
we're,
no. Yeah.
yeah.
So Brad,
Yes,
I think our time is up.
that's up to Elizabeth to make that.
That's up to Elizabeth.
Well, I mean,
Okay. If there's more conversation to be had.
if there's more conversation, yeah, we can have it. We don't have to be out of here till 9, but the group can,
If you don't have to leave, I mean,
Yeah.
if you're willing to keep talking more about goals,
Yeah.
I would love that. And if also you're
Yeah.
excited to have it fully laid out and.
I thought that's what we were doing tonight.
yeah,
This report is to kind of think about what would be the goals, and then the question is, what's the process even to kind of, to look at that?
Right.
But yeah, I had some notes written about goals, and I have a feeling that Commissioner Kirkpatrick did as well.
Yeah.
Oh, I'd love to hear what your
Yeah.
notes are.
Well,
Me too.
I feel like I'm talking out of ignorance, and I would rather hear from you first,
Go
because
ahead.
I'm not quite sure what, I mean, my big question is, what historically has the city done, or what can it do? What is the city's role in the whole area of food plans, number one? Number two, the food insecurity piece of it. Because if I were queen of making a food plan, I would be looking at things like increasing cold storage through collaboration with some other entities, and looking for foundation grants would be the strategy. I mean, that just kind of thing comes to mind. And how to increase the hours and schedule of the farmers market, for example, would be another place that I would think about. But I don't know what the city's role is, and
Mhm.
that's where I feel completely out of.
I think that's an interesting question, and can I just tag on with that and say, I wonder if part of the role, clearly there's some role with, you know, is it within policy? Does policy need to change? You know, that kind of thing.
Mhm.
Fred can probably elaborate on that. But there's also things like, can the city resource something? Can the city incentivize something? Can the city create a market for something?
I have even down here a tax incentive, so thinking
Right.
about the Bush
Mhm.
Prairie 5 acres, could that be turned into lots?
Yeah. Yeah.
So, I have a sister who's low income, living in a senior low income community in Tacoma. And the thing that they have there, and they're big, I can't believe that she has it and digs it all up herself and plants it, but the occupants of that senior housing can ask to have these
Yeah.
fairly nice sized plots. And she plants peas and tomatoes and, uses it as fresh fruit. I mean,
Uh-huh.
has the ability to freeze it and can it and store it in tiny one-bedroom apartments, but, yeah.
Yeah.
I guess that, I mean, so my goal was around how to increase the number of free plots for people, but then I didn't know how much the current ones that are available, I think I saw something in here about 20 plots or something somewhere. Are they being used?
That's at Tumwater United Methodist Church.
Yeah.
That's-
Some information.
They've got a very small congregation, and that's about all they can handle.
Mhm.
And some information I got late, so it didn't show up in this report, but it will later, was I had asked, because I had heard that there is grant funding available through the city for community gardens.
Wow.
And so I had asked, and I got that information late, and so my understanding is there's money there, and that, it's not being, you know, I guess my follow-up question, because it was an email exchange and I need to follow up, I don't know if there are requests coming in, but they don't meet, you know, it's like, it's outside of what the grant, parameters are, or if it's just not getting,
Information out about it.
yeah, if people don't know that it's available, I'm not sure, but I know that there is money available, and I heard that so far it was just the garden at the Methodist Church that has access funding, and that they have asked for additional funding, that they haven't gotten. So again, I'm not sure if that's because they're asking for things that are outside of the scope, but my understanding is there is some money there.
Anyway, those were a couple ideas that I had.
It's like bounce the tennis ball toward Brad.
Yeah.
You know, as we get into the policies and the actions that we're gonna do in this area, I assume that, like from the other chapters, you're gonna assign them, to a portion of the city. And I'm curious, where you think the center focus on staff, within the city is gonna be on this portion of the element. You know, the only one I saw mentioned in here was Parks and Recreation, and I really don't think that, what they're focused on, meshes with this as well as maybe, the city administrator, might be where you would put it. Or maybe since, do we have an economic development person yet?
Not yet.
Okay, if we ever get one of those,
We're in the process of trying to hire.
if we ever get one of those, maybe that person, but, you know,
I think it really depends on what kind of program we're trying to run. I think in terms of, say, a facility like Isabel Bush Park and or some other community garden structure, it made more sense to have that as part of parks. They have the staff, they have
The tools, yeah.
do that kind of thing. If we are looking at supporting other groups and maybe looking for grant monies to add seed money for, I think that could be in community development. But, you know, we'd have to really sort of think through what is the best avenue to support this particular thing.
seems to me that all of these issues that we have are essentially identical with Olympia and Lacey. And so what I thought we were going to do in this area was work through existing agencies in Thurston County, which the city already supports many of those agencies, not with just money, but with staff time, when they meet, when they make their discussions, so that we would throw the bulk of our effort into supporting Thurston County organizations that are already mentioned. And
It would be my preference not to develop a brand-new program that would, but at the same time, have that level of support to the residents of Tumwater as part of that program. That's a big part, I think, of what the council would be looking for.
I know, so I used to work for many years with GRUB, Garden Raised Bounty, and I know when I worked there, the city of Tumwater, and I don't know if you're still doing that, but one of the programs they have, GRUB has, is building gardens at people's homes, backyard gardens, and that the city of Tumwater consistently gave a small amount of money to GRUB to say, okay, of the whatever 50 gardens you're going to build this season, please make sure 4 of them, wasn't a large number, but there was always a certain number to make sure that were built in Tumwater. And so the way it would work at GRUB, you know, we'd get applicants, and if we got applicants that exceeded the number of slots that we had, but if the city of Tumwater gave money, we made sure to prioritize that, however much they paid for. So, and I don't know where that, you know, what department, where that money was coming from or how that worked out, but.
It looks like there's a suite of state-led grant things that would be, I would do the livestock thing, but that's separate. Local food system grants are available, and I think last year they awarded 1.4 to 41 projects across the state. The next round of stuff is supposed to come out this month in terms of what the requirements are for that. I could send you some of that information to be considering that. Now, again, I'm not sure where all that funding is necessarily coming from, given state budget issues, and there are a number of different things to think about that might be applicable.
If you get that budget, who would manage it?
That's
I think that's,
yeah, that's what we're thinking.
The other question that I had is, when we had those like gardens, like community gardens, who put that together? Is that the county?
it has in our community been a church so far that has community garden spaces. The United Methodist Church, did you say?
Also the
Tumwater Unit.
Presbyterian Church in Olympia. There's a number of, but it's mostly,
Here's what the little entries look like with teenagers building them.
I'm not aware of Olympia having a program. Other jurisdictions like Seattle, for example, had what they call a P-patch program for community garden space.
The Conservation District may also
The Conservation District,
have match program.
Tina Wagner convened a meeting recently of community gardens, of like folks that lead community gardens within Thurston County. And I attended that, and it's a mix of, you know, some community gardens are at churches, some are at just random people, you know, land.
Or HOA, like the community open space piece of an HOA.
That's right, a whole variety of spaces. And because they do have the Farm My Yard, I feel like, I don't know, I feel like they were providing sort of like technical support and being a convener and answering questions, but the Thurston Conservation District doesn't say run community, you know, they don't have community garden programs themselves, but try to help match things up.
More of a clearinghouse for information and connection. Yeah.
Because I was thinking that having like a youth council for the city of Tumwater that can kind of like communicate with all these churches or entities or apply for grants, and maybe this council can be, just like residents of Tumwater, farmers, and businesses that can, you know, run it. Like, I think that was something that I was when I was reading, like a solution, probably beneficial for area.
Well, it was interesting when I was brought on to do this project, and Brad had given me some background information about conversations that had been had previously, and I don't know if it was just with city council or with this body, but had, there were 2 food system plans that had been put in like a packet that had gone out. And it was the Spokane region and Skagit County, and so those were plans that I had looked at. And in both instances, those communities do have what you're saying. They had existing, you know, food system council, some kind of body that had already been convening and doing a lot of work that supported that plan. And so that was also, I felt like, a little bit of a constraint that I had in doing this, where I wasn't able to interact with a group from Tumwater that had already been like, you know, kind of digging into the issues. But yeah, and whether it was a food council for the city of Tumwater or kind of going back to those regional collaborations, because I feel like currently the South Sound Food System Network has been the entity to try to take that role, but the way they've been functioning in the recent years, I feel like, is less of a council and more just sort of like a networking space. That I feel like, yeah, having.
Yeah, something like can connect to that network just for our city.
Exactly.
You know, I think that would be beneficial. Also, I think it's very important, like the teaching or, you know, workshops or incentive for people, like how to garden or how to cook with the products or the produce that you're getting, or for, well, I guess, you were talking about these gardens for some teenagers, but this council can also take over that, you know, have programs in, you know, where you, kind of tell people, hey, you know, like, here are seeds, like garden, or here's how you do it. And so this council could have like several,
Yeah.
yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know, it would be interesting to look into other, like you were mentioning, I'm not sure what you said.
Spokane region and
And
Skagit County, but yes, see what other folks are doing.
Kind of like how they're doing it or how it happened.
City of Olympia might be a good person to talk to about community gardens. They run a program that has a couple different locations, one at Yager Park, and they've got about 80 different spots. They run it through their Parks and Rec program.
Mr. Kirkpatrick.
Well, listening to that, the organization that hit me right in the head is United Way of Thurston County. I mean, there is an organization with money, with permanent staff, with a lot of experience in going in and solving community issues. Just a matter of getting United Way interested in doing that, and then.
Or contracting with them.
Hmm?
Contracting with them to be it.
However you want to look at it, but, you know, we have an outstanding United Way organization here, and the things that they tackle, they do well.
Erica?
Oh, I was just gonna kind of go back to talking about goals and policies and how the city could be involved. I think it would be worthwhile to also include water resources, about watering lawns and maybe converting our grass lawns into gardens and seeing how much water conservancy or what the difference would be for water usage. And then also thinking from a land use perspective, allowed local farm stands in neighborhoods, because I feel like that's kind of how this food system plan was brought about, was community gardens and having farm stands in communities, or having these places where distribution and everything. So I feel like that's policies and things and goals the city can assist with as well. So including the other departments like water resources, sustainability, and then also us and land use, and then also Parks and Rec. And then working with the school districts. And I like what you said about the incentives. If there's any kind of extra, because I know we do workshops, and I know through the Parks and Rec department, we work with families, and then also maybe even the seniors. And also we have parks. The city of Tumwater has parks. So if that's an interest in the community that the community has, it's really gauging the interest on, kind of if that program would be viable long-term. And then, Dispute, I have a lot more notes too, but I just wanted to like help you guys get an idea of what the city can do, from that perspective.
And that was one of my questions, is does the city have land that we can turn into some of these plots that we're just not thinking of and not utilizing?
That are food safe.
Yeah, and I mean, because there is land aplenty, and then for the younger generation to get them involved, finding a way to gamify the system, like Grace was talking about, that reward piece that the younger generation just craves. I mean, there's people that sit on their phone and they have a digital garden that they will manage for 40 hours a week or even 18 hours a day, but they won't go outside and do it.
They don't get that
And it's
vaccine
like,
all
because
dirty.
you don't get that same, that, not instant gratification, but still gratification from it, because I have a nephew that I'm just like, what are you doing? Well, I'm planting my seeds and doing all this. I'm like, you're spending so much effort in this when you could just go outside and do the same thing.
Oh, really?
And it's just,
It's harder work.
yeah, but it's one of those
Be clear.
things that if we have something that we can kind of gamify and make
Right.
it so the younger generation gets, so, Boy Scouts, go back to that. But it's something
Thinking
like
about the
that.
Boys and Girls Club,
Mhm.
they need things to do. I know
Yeah.
there's the homework time, but after that, it would be wonderful. And to get the Boy Scouts in there, my grandson is in Boy Scouts. I don't know what all they do, but I know that they're supposed to be doing community work, and
I would sign my yard up right now to have somebody come and turn it into a garden. I'd be happy to.
We haven't done so already. I know the Tumwater High School program, the Boys and Girls Club is located there as well, so I'm wondering if there are some connections that are already there. I know they grow things and they sell plants in the springtime over winter, so.
That's a CTE program.
CTE programs are great.
is it possible? HOAs are, HOAs. And they seem to be very fond of green grass and a lot of water in their front yards. And people then who get permission can put in turf instead. But, and when I think about the water usage and all of that, are there codes in the city that people could start tweaking for developments to not have these kind of HOA rules? It's what?
Nudging HOAs in particular directions is an ongoing issue.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
All those kinds of things, or trees.
Trees.
We did just hire a water conservation specialist, with the Water Resources Department, and their whole program will be based on reducing the irrigation for lawns.
That'd be wonderful.
So that is what they're developing, and this food system plan can be brought to them, or we can collaborate with that person potentially and see where these goals and policies lead into programs that support that end.
Love
To
that.
clear that with the deer that graze in my backyard.
I know.
Lucky you. You haven't had a development around you yet.
I was in a really loose HOA and was this close to putting up a fence and calling it a community garden. And then with the, not necessarily deer, but
Rabbits.
how do people access it? Who can access it? When can they access it? That's right beside my house. And if it's right beside the high school and you have lots of people wandering over breaks, then it almost becomes an attractive nuisance. So there are good places and there are not as good of places. And we decided that our little place was not the best place.
Wasn't the lead on the Tumwater, farm process the mayor? Didn't Pete commit?
He was a big champion of.
Was part of, I think that was part of it. Now, the urban ag that you raised earlier came out of council discussions in 2010 before my time, but I was gonna do a little digging to see who else, what other things were talked about. The acreage limit was really based on sort of what is compatible with an urban area.
Gotcha.
Part of it, but I need to do some more digging to figure out what else was talked about.
Or if there are other options, I mean, maybe ag land isn't the best way to characterize what's happening there right now. And maybe there are creative ways.
I think that's right, because there might be other opportunities. For example, you sometimes read about fairly upscale restaurants that have their little rooftop gardens for specialty ingredients. Obviously, that's not going to be feeding gobs of people, but, you know, they're using what would otherwise just be a unused space on their roof, or maybe it's off in, you know, a side yard or something like that, and they're producing some kind of food item. So if the city can encourage that kind of stuff, maybe not full-blown ordinance or whatever, but encourage those sorts of uses.
Or double check that we're not actively discouraging.
Right.
By,
And, you know, some of that is, you know, the water diversion or whatever, but, you know, there's all kinds of things like that that I think are possible to you know, use the land resource, use the other, you know, growing surface resource, the water, but also the nutrition, you know, connect people to whatever the, say a bunch of mushroom compost to get their garden going. You know, hook them up with whatever the resource is that can help provide that, or wood chips, or whatever the thing is that helps them.
sometimes with mulch and mulch programs, one of the biggest issues can be
Weeds.
contamination.
Right.
Mhm.
So one of the kind of overarching goals is that there really does need to be more research and study done about what can and cannot be done.
Right.
I mean, that, I think, is a valid goal,
Right.
Yeah.
kind of a beginning place to
Right.
be.
Right.
One of the Kiwanis Gardens is on Capitol Campus,
Mhm.
right in front of Department of Transportation, and they've also in the past governors, planted the area around the governor's mansion.
Right.
And kindergartners come in every year and, plant, the garlic. So that's sort of a tradition, so it's
Mhm.
all tied into education and getting kids interested in farming.
Mhm.
The state standards have a lot of really open space for agriculture. The issue tends to be fitting in all the other classroom stuff and the requirements for the tests. So when we're talking about education, taking a half day to go and visit a garden means that we're going to be behind on our literacy and math skills. And at those early ages, those literacy math skills are the ones that get tested. So those are the constraints that the teachers feel.
Well, I think it's been brought up before, we have beautiful areas over here. Why don't we start planting those with some garlic and other things,
Mhm.
right?
Right.
I think you said that a year ago or so.
We got the whole airport over there that they can't build anything else on.
And the Gophers have indicated they would love to.
Chew on that.
Maybe we could feed the gophers with whatever we grow.
Yeah.
Any further questions? What do you think?
No, I mean, I'm enjoying the conversation and taking notes. It's great, yeah.
A particular area that we could go in that you would like us to go in?
Well, you all did spend quite a bit of time, I would say, in processors and producers, thinking about gardens and farms. And so I guess maybe just to have you pull back out for a moment and think about, I'm just going to scan the sectors again to make sure there's not something more that you want to lean into on.
Public health and nutrition, or
Yeah.
land use and conservation? I guess that fits into pretty. Sale and distribution? Yeah.
Oh, and I guess like one last thing, and you did bring up some, if there's any things that you want to just throw to me to research, like if you've heard about something, and you did mention things, Olympia's doing X, Y, and Z, but if there's other, programs or communities that you've heard about that you're, throw that out there.
Well, and I would
Oh, go
love
ahead.
to hear about Harbor Wholesale, since they are a local food distributor and they do a lot for the local parties. I don't know if they help out Tumwater at all, but I know that they love to partner on, food safety and food
Okay.
sustainability. And, I mean, maybe they're willing to help truck some things around or do something like that, or maybe they have a food program that we could benefit from here in Tumwater. Because talking about Olympia, Tumwater, Lacey, we have these three communities, and we do need to partner with each other more instead of just standing up things in our own communities and spending hundreds of hours on planning something that the others also spending hundreds of hours on, where we could just say, hey, let's kind of cheat off each other's notes for a second and come up with something together. Like, I just think that's the consistent theme that we keep hearing is we can do so much more together, and then take that and do it independently at the same time. But until we start doing that more, which we might be, we won't be as successful.
Commissioner Edwards.
Yeah, thank you. Something that I've kind of been thinking about throughout this presentation that it would be interesting to learn more about is the restaurants connection in all of this, right? Like, how have restaurants been doing with their food supplies? Like, have they been able to adequately get to local resources that they wanted to, or all those things like that? Because I think that there's such a big part of our community that employs so many people, that I think can sometimes be forgotten a little bit. So it'd be interesting to hear more about kind of how they fit into this puzzle.
Great. And do you have any restaurants in particular in mind that you could name?
Not particularly. I just think any restaurant in Tumwater that's like, maybe not so much of a chain restaurant, but more focusing on like the local restaurants, would be really interesting. 'Cause I know we talk a lot about, going shopping and going to the store and buying groceries and all that type of stuff, but I know for me and kind of, a lot of my colleagues that I work with, like, sometimes when you're working, that really isn't an option, right? Or you're gonna go have a work meeting and you're gonna go to a local restaurant or something like that and eat lunch with one of your coworkers to discuss a certain topic, right? Or even, I mean, for me personally, I probably eat out way too much, right? Just because it's easier and convenient just with my household and my lifestyle and kind of with what I have going on. So, I try to be, mindful about, going to the store and what food I buy and where I buy it from. But honestly, the majority of my food probably comes from different restaurants or things like that that I end up eating. So I don't know if I have particular ones in mind, but definitely like, more focusing on the local ones with that, I think would be interesting.
Great.
One place to go would be River's Edge, since the city owns the building.
Great. Who owns the building?
I would be
golf club, of
interested
course.
in understanding, kind of going back to some of our conversation about city resources being used for food production. And literally what areas on a map or mostly where, not so much acreage, but that's useful too, I guess, but where in the city are there places that are suitable for the city maybe to free up or make available for gardening purposes or farming purposes?
Great. I'd like to propose a goal around reducing waste. Oh, shoot, it went just right through my brain and now I just lost it.
It'll come back.
But it's the whole thing about if we could reduce the waste and repurpose it to the food bank, because we have cold storage, then we're hitting several of these things and wrapping them into one, because I keep hearing about the cold storage, and I really believe in the gardening thing, and I just think another focus is really should be around that whole food waste and collaborating with Olympia at least. Lacey seems to me sometimes a little bit further east, but north, around an adequate cold storage so that we can so that the food banks can be more efficient
Mhm.
and get food out to those who really, really need it. Some of those folks may or may not benefit from the gardening, some will, a lot
Right,
won't,
right,
because
right,
their lives may not allow that time to do that.
right.
I would want to make sure we don't miss that in the closed setting that we do.
Mr. Edwards, your hand is still raised. Did you have another?
Oh, yeah. Well, and I would kind of what was talked about in terms of, we're better together, right? And looking at our partners and different things. I think the city can really take a lead on that. And also that makes me think about it kind of in a unique way, right? Because maybe we don't have enough land to, get as much farming done as we want to or something like that, right? But we have, like we talked about, the other things that maybe we could work with other, cities or groups or whatever on that we have that they don't, right? And so even maybe, even though it doesn't directly have to do with food, if we can kind of focus on things that help with our partnerships in ways that we can get things like the cold storage or partner with places that maybe have a little bit more farmland or, things like that. I think that that would really benefit us too and kind of think outside the box and be like, okay, well, this, doesn't necessarily, when you think about it, first equal food, but if you look at the partnerships we can create, that it really does benefit us in the long run to put more resources towards that.
Thank you.
Anything else?
More discussion? Motion?
With that, I motion to adjourn for the evening.
Is there a second?
Second.
Commissioner Staff making a motion and Commissioner Kirkpatrick seconding that we adjourn for the evening after a really great discussion.
Yeah, thank you so much.
Thank you.
It's been moved and seconded. Is there any discussion more? Don't want to cut anybody off. All right. All in favor of adjourning tonight, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Great, we're adjourned. Thank you.
Thank you.
Have a good night, everyone.
Yeah, bye, Grace.
Thanks, Grace.
We probably talk about this for hours
Yes.
and hours
Yeah.
and hours.
I should have brought snacks.
I know.